My mother-in-law created a group chat called Real Family and left me out. She had no idea I could read every message. I was in the kitchen, wiping down the counter after dinner, when my husband, Elias, left his phone charging on the island. It lit up. A message preview from a group chat popped up. Real Family, and underneath it, from Beatrice Muller, his mother. We'll discuss the baby shower on Sunday. And obviously, she doesn't need to be there. My stomach clenched. That was me. No doubt about it. At first, I thought maybe it was some casual mistake, a group I wasn't in just because I wasn't biologically related. But then it hit me. Elias never mentioned a group like that. And the name? Real Family? That stung. I picked up his phone. I know I shouldn't have. But curiosity has a way of eating through morals like acid. The screen was still unlocked. And what I saw changed everything. It wasn't a group with dozens of distant cousins. It was just 7 people. His mother, his 2 sisters, his aunt, his cousin, Elias, and his father. Every single one of them was in it, except me, and for some reason, Elias never turned off message previews. I could read every single thing they said, every dinner, every party, every celebration. All of it had been discussed, planned, really, behind my back. But that wasn't even the worst part. They talked about me. Not directly. Not in ways I could screenshot and confront without being accused of overreacting. But in those snide, poised comments that feel like paper cuts to your soul, Beatrice, we just want him to be happy. He used to laugh more before. His sister, Emily, he never used to be so distant before she came around. His aunt, she never quite fit, did she? And the knife twist, Elias never defended me. Not once. He either ignored the comments or gave the kind of dry, neutral replies that were worse than silence. Like, he didn't want to upset them more than he wanted to protect me. So I kept reading, day after day. I never told Elias I knew. I couldn't. I needed to see how far it would go. When we sat down for dinner, he'd tell me his mom had forgotten to include me in some brunch, or that his family was keeping things low-key this year for Christmas. Lies, all of it. And now I knew the worst betrayal wasn't from Beatrice. It was from Elias. He watched them erase me, and he let them. I wish I could say I confronted him that night. I didn't. I pretended nothing was wrong, smiled when I had to, cooked his favorite pasta the next evening, slept beside him while replaying every message in my head, over and over. But something had shifted. I started planning, not for revenge, for clarity, because I wasn't sure if I was living with a man or with his mother's puppet. The next morning, I woke up before Elias and stared at his sleeping face, wondering how someone could lie so effortlessly with their silence. I had spent years thinking we were building something real, a future, a family, a partnership. But now I questioned everything. Was I just a placeholder? A distraction until he found someone his family could really approve of? That thought made me sick. Still, I played along. That week, I became the perfect wife. I cooked more, laughed more, touched his arm when I passed by. I asked him about work. I acted like nothing was wrong, and he seemed relieved. Like he was grateful I hadn't noticed something. But I had noticed everything. By Thursday, the group chat lit up again. They were planning Elias's surprise birthday dinner. Beatrice wrote, "We'll do it at the vineyard in Nucatel, very private. Family only, of course." Amelie chimed in, "Should we tell him it's just a wine tasting, so she doesn't find out?" And then Elias replied, "Good idea. She's been a bit sensitive lately." I had to leave the room. I ran to the bathroom, locked the door, and sat on the cold tiles until the tears stopped burning my cheeks. Sensitive? I wasn't being sensitive. I was being erased, bit by bit. That night, I decided to test him. I mentioned I'd seen a flyer for a vineyard tasting that weekend and thought it might be nice for us to go. He hesitated, then smiled too quickly. "Oh, yeah, maybe. But I think I'll be busy Saturday," he mumbled. "Might have a work thing." I nodded. Of course. That Saturday, I let him leave. I even packed his coat for him. He kissed me on the cheek and said, "I'll be back late." I waited 10 minutes after the door closed before I opened my laptop and pulled up the group chat from the desktop syncing app. He'd forgotten I once helped him install it when he changed phones last year. The photos were already coming in. Long wooden tables covered in flowers and wine glasses. Beatrice in a pastel suit. Elias, smiling, holding a glass of champagne while everyone sang to him. There was a cake, balloons, a sign behind him that said to our golden boy, not even a mention of me, not even a lie to include me. But then came something I didn't expect. A message from his cousin, Sophia. She's not here, right? Then Beatrice replied, God, no, I'd never allow that woman near a day like this. And Elias? He reacted with a laugh emoji. That was it. No neutral reply, no ignoring, no awkward silence. He laughed. He had finally picked a side, and it wasn't mine. That night, I didn't sleep. I laid in bed with my eyes wide open, listening to the hum of the fridge and the soft ticking of the clock, every sound louder than usual in the silence of betrayal. Elias came home just after midnight, smelling like expensive wine and someone else's affection. He kissed my forehead and whispered, the tasting ran late. Sorry, I murmured something and turned away. The truth is, I wasn't just hurt. I was humiliated. They had laughed at me, lied to me. And for what? Because I wasn't born with the Muller name? Because I didn't wear pearls and, quote, opera like Beatrice wanted? I started documenting everything. Screenshots, photos, I even recorded a few voice notes to myself, just in case I ever forgot how it felt to be erased like that, one group chat at a time. A week later, another notification arrived. Beatrice, he still hasn't asked for a divorce. Do you think he's afraid? Amelie, he's too soft. He hates confrontation. He needs a push. Sophia, maybe we give him one. They were plotting. Slowly, quietly, carefully, but definitely plotting. That's when I decided I wasn't going to wait around to be discarded like a failed investment. If they were going to play chess, I was going to be 5 moves ahead. I started being strategic. I found ways to bring up the idea of marriage counseling in front of Elias, lightly, casually, just to see his reaction. He flinched every time. I suggested we visit his parents for dinner. Suddenly, I was eager to reconnect, to bond with the family. He looked horrified, said they were busy, said his mom was not feeling well lately. So I sent flowers, a handwritten note, thinking of you, Beatrice. Hope we can catch up soon. She never replied. But in the group chat, Beatrice, she's mocking me now. Amelie, she's dangerous. We need to end this. Sophia, let's just expose her. The baby thing, maybe? The baby thing? I froze. What baby thing? There had never been a baby. I wasn't pregnant. I wasn't trying to be. What were they talking about? That night, I scrolled through months of old messages in the group, trying to find any reference. And finally, I found it. 6 months ago, Elias had told his family that I'd faked a pregnancy to keep him from leaving during a rough patch. He said I'd bought a fake test, lied to his face, manipulated him. That never happened. Never. In fact, he was the one who broke down crying in our hallway the night I told him I couldn't get pregnant. After months of tests and silent hopes, I'd finally given up. And he had held me, swearing that none of it changed how he felt about me. He lied to them. Or maybe he lied to me. And now, they were going to use that lie to destroy whatever was left of me. But they had no idea I knew. They had no idea I'd read every single word. And they had no idea that I had already started talking to someone. His name was Tobias. He was Elias's cousin, the only one who'd ever treated me like a human being, and the only person not in that group chat. I hadn't spoken to Tobias in months, not since a family wedding in Lucerne where we ended up seated next to each other. That night, while everyone danced and gossiped, we'd shared a quiet moment over champagne and secrets. He told me he didn't feel like a Muller, said he hated how performative they all were, that he only stayed close to the family out of guilt, not love. I never forgot that. So when I sent him a message out of the blue, I wasn't sure if he'd even respond. He did, almost immediately. It's been too long. Are you okay? That was all it took. I didn't say everything right away. Just hinted that things were complicated, that I was feeling isolated. His reply was short. It's not your imagination. I've seen it too. That hit me like a wave. Because finally, someone acknowledged it. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. I was right. Over the next few days, we exchanged messages. Tobias never said anything directly against his family, but he didn't defend them either. He asked questions, careful ones, but laced with something that felt like genuine concern. Then he said something that changed everything. You should come to Zurich. Just for the weekend. Get some air. I didn't answer right away. But the thought of being out of that house, away from the ghost smiles and Ilias's empty eyes, was more tempting than I expected. When I finally agreed, it felt like betrayal. But betrayal had already become a language I was fluent in. They'd taught me well. So I told Elias I was going to visit a friend in Lausanne for the weekend. He barely looked up from his phone. Okay, drive safe, not even a single question. I left the next morning, heart pounding, suitcase light. Tobias met me at the train station, wearing the same old coat he'd worn at that wedding, slightly frayed at the cuffs, too soft to be new. His eyes were the same too, quiet, observant, kind. We didn't hug, we didn't need to. He took me to a tiny cafe near the lake, and after the third cup of tea, I finally said it. All this time, they've been talking about me, behind my back. And Elias just let it happen? Tobias didn't flinch. He nodded, slowly. I figured, he said. You were always too real for them? I almost laughed. It was such a strange thing to say, but it felt right. I told him everything. About the group chat. About the fake pregnancy lie. About the birthday party. I even showed him a few screenshots. He didn't ask why I hadn't left Elias yet. He just listened. When I finished, he said quietly, you know, if you ever needed someone to back you up, ... I'm not afraid of Beatrice. I stared at him. You'd go against your family. He met my eyes. I already have. And just like that, a new kind of plan started forming. Not revenge, not drama, but truth. Because they thought I was weak. They had no idea what I was about to do next. When I got back home Sunday evening, everything looked exactly the same. The hallway light still flickered, Elias's shoes still sat crooked by the door, and our wedding photos still hung slightly off-center on the wall. But something inside me had shifted. I no longer felt like the woman trying to belong. I was done begging for space in a family that had already decided I was disposable. The next morning, I printed everything. All the screenshots, every comment, every message about me, around me, against me. I put them in a sleek black folder. No dramatics, no highlights, just cold, clear facts. I left the folder on Elias's side of the bed and went for a walk. 2 hours later, he called me. His voice was shaking. Where did you get all that? I didn't answer the question. I just said, read it carefully. Don't call me again until you know exactly what you're going to say. And I hung up. He didn't call again that day, or the next. But Beatrice did. She must have gotten into a frenzy, because her number popped up 3 times on my phone, then once from a blocked number. I ignored every call. Then a message came in. You need to stop manipulating my son. This is harassment. I laughed, out loud, in the middle of the grocery store. It was textbook Beatrice, twisting the narrative until the villain wore pearls and the victim held a folder. I took a screenshot of her message and saved it with the rest. Later that week, Tobias called. I've been thinking, he said. You don't just need to leave. You need to show them why they'll never have power over you again. He was right. Quiet exits don't make noise. And these people only listened when they were afraid of being exposed. So IRS VPD to the next Mueller family event. Beatrice's birthday dinner. She would never invite me, of course. But Elias did. Probably out of guilt or fear or both. When he texted, "You're still family," I almost choked on the irony. Still, I said yes. That Saturday, I walked into the restaurant in Geneva in a slate gray dress, hair pinned up, face calm, every eye turned. Even Tobias looked slightly stunned. Beatrice's smile froze the second she saw me. "Darling," she said tightly, "I didn't know you were coming." I leaned in and kissed her cheek. Well, it's family only, right? Elias sat like a statue at the other end of the table. He hadn't spoken to me in person since the folder. But I didn't come for him. I came for her. Halfway through the meal, I stood up and gently tapped my glass with a fork. The clinking silenced the table. I just want to thank you all, I said, voice steady, for being so honest behind my back. It really helped me see things clearly. Beatrice's fork stopped mid-air. And Elias, I continued, thank you for showing me exactly where your loyalty lies. Amelie scoffed. Is this a joke? No, I smiled. It's closure. I reached into my bag and slid a stack of envelopes down the table, one for each person. Inside? Copies of the group chat printouts. I thought you'd all like to see what loyalty looks like in writing. Silence. Shock. Tobias hiding a smirk. And me? I felt lighter than I had in years. Because I wasn't their outsider anymore. I was their reckoning. The fallout was immediate. Beatrice didn't even open the envelope. She just stared at it like it was toxic. But her sister, the aunt who'd once called me a phase, tore hers open right at the table. Her lips moved as she scanned the messages, eyes darting left to right. Her face drained of color. Amelie was the first to speak. Where did you get these? I tilted my head. Does it matter? They're your words. You should own them. Elias still hadn't looked at me. His hands were clenched under the table, jaw tight, but I didn't need his reaction anymore. His silence had been louder than anything he could say. What surprised me was Tobias. He stood up, calmly, hands in his pockets, and said, She's not the one who should be embarrassed. All of you should be. Then he left. No drama, no speech. Just a quiet exit that shook the entire table. I followed minutes later. I didn't look back. The next morning, I woke up to 23 messages from Elias. I didn't read them. I didn't have to. But one thing I did read, the group chat. Because, yes, it was still open. Elias hadn't changed the password. Maybe he forgot. Maybe he didn't care. Or maybe deep down, he wanted me to keep watching. And what I saw? Beatrice had removed everyone from the group. Everyone except Elias. Then she renamed it. Just Us. I couldn't believe it. After everything, she still wanted control. Even after being humiliated in front of her precious circle, she chose to tighten the grip on the only person she still had, her son. But Elias didn't reply in the chat. Not once. Not even when she wrote, She'll leave you. You know that, right? He didn't answer. I didn't either. Instead, I called a lawyer. Not to file for divorce. Not yet. I needed to understand what I was walking away from. What I was entitled to. What secrets Elias might still be keeping. Financial, emotional, or otherwise. The lawyer, a woman named Marianne Schmid, was sharp and fast. After I explained the situation, she asked one question. Does he know you're consulting? No. Good. Don't tell him. Let him keep thinking you are unsure. And she was right. Because power shifts in silence. And I had been silent for too long. A few days later, Elias finally cornered me in the kitchen. You made a fool of me, he said quietly. I looked up from my tea. No, you did that on your own. I just passed out the copies. He flinched. I never meant for it to get that far, he murmured. I thought if I just kept the peace. You mean kept me quiet. He didn't deny it. And then came the words I didn't expect. I think we should separate. At least for a while. I stared at him. He thought he was taking the lead. That he was making the decision. That he still had control. I almost laughed. But I didn't. I just nodded. I agree. And in that moment, he looked more lost than I'd ever seen him. Because, for the first time since we met, I wasn't waiting to be chosen. The next morning, I packed a small suitcase. Not out of spite, not to make a scene. Just the basics. A few clothes, my passport, my laptop. I left the wedding photo on the dresser. It didn't belong to me anymore. Elias watched from the hallway as I zipped the bag shut. He didn't say a word. That silence? It spoke volumes. I'll stay with a friend? I said flatly, slipping on my coat. He nodded. Okay. And just like that, I walked out. But I didn't go to a friend's. I went to Zurich. Again. Tobias opened the door before I even knocked. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept since the dinner. But when he saw me, his face softened. You came. I didn't know where else to go, I admitted. You came to the right place. And for the first time in weeks, I believed someone. That night, we sat on his balcony overlooking the quiet city. The chill in the air made me wrap myself tighter in his blanket. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. There's something about shared disillusionment that creates instant understanding. Eventually, I broke the silence. They never saw me as part of them. No, he agreed. Because you were never small enough to fit in their mold. I looked at him. And you? I broke their mold a long time ago. It wasn't romantic. Not yet. It wasn't flirtation or rebound or drama. It was something quieter, safer, but there was something there. And then he said it. You know, they're already rewriting the story. I raised an eyebrow. They're saying you fabricated the messages, that you manipulated Elias, that you turned me against them. I should have felt angry, but I didn't. I felt tired. Let them, I whispered. Let them lie to each other. That's what they do best. He looked at me long and hard. You're not going back, are you? I shook my head. No, I'm done being the villain in someone else's fairy tale. The next day, I sent Elias's one final message. I'll have the lawyer send over the paperwork. No need to reply. He didn't. But 2 hours later, Beatrice posted a photo on her social media, a black and white shot of Elias as a child. Captioned, "Some women will never understand what a real family looks like." The comments were full of sympathy, praise, support. That was her strategy. Turn the spotlight onto herself. Paint me as a stranger who intruded, disrupted, and left chaos behind. But I didn't care, because I had something they'd never understand: peace. In the weeks that followed, I expected to feel regret. I didn't. Instead, what came was clarity. It's strange how silence fills a space. After so much noise, lies, comments, whispers behind my back, the quiet was almost a gift. I started hearing myself again. Remembering who I was before I became the wife, the outsider, her. I stayed in Zurich longer than I planned. Tobias never rushed me. He gave me space in his home, but more importantly, he gave me space in his life without asking for anything in return. We never defined what we were. There was no need. It wasn't a romance forged in revenge. It was something slower, something earned. Meanwhile, Marianne, my lawyer, was efficient. Elias never contested anything. Maybe he was too embarrassed. Maybe he was relieved. I'll never know. I didn't ask. But then something happened. One morning, I got an email from Marianne with the subject line, "You'll want to see this." Attached was a document Elias had submitted in response to a routine asset disclosure. Inside was a single sentence that made me freeze. Joint savings account, transferred to separate account under parental advisement, March 12th. Parental advisement, March 12th. That was 4 days after I discovered the group chat. And 10 days before Elias suggested we separate, I felt the blood rush to my ears. He hadn't just emotionally betrayed me, he'd moved money, quietly, with Beatrice's help. Before even telling me he wanted out. Before I packed a single bag, I called Marianne immediately. "This changes things, right?" "Oh, it changes everything," she said. "That's marital misconduct. And it's provable." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It was almost poetic how Beatrice's need to control everything had finally given me a legal advantage. She thought she was shielding Elias. She'd handed me a loaded weapon instead. Marianne filed an amendment to our separation terms. Elias responded within 48 hours. He offered a settlement. Generous, too generous, which only confirmed what we already suspected. He didn't want this going to court. He didn't want the truth exposed. Not in legal documents. Not in records that could follow him into future relationships, jobs, or polite dinner conversations. I signed the papers. Tobias was there when I did. He didn't say much, just poured me a glass of wine afterward and asked what I wanted to do next. I stared out the window at the city. "I want to disappear from their story," I said, "and rewrite my own." That night, I booked a short trip to Lisbon, alone, just to breathe. To start something that belonged only to me. When I told Tobias, he smiled. "Good, take your story back." And just before I left, he handed me an envelope. Inside was a small Polaroid photo from that wedding years ago. The two of us, blurry in the background, mid-laugh. "You've always belonged somewhere," he said quietly. They just weren't the ones to give it to you. Lisbon was warm, chaotic, and alive. Everything my old life wasn't. I spent the first few days just walking. No itinerary. No pressure. I wandered through alleyways that smelled like grilled sardines and salt, bought pastries from tiny cafes where no one knew my name. And for the first time in years, no one looked at me like I was a problem to fix. I wasn't Ilias's wife. I wasn't that woman Beatrice sneered about. I was just me. On the fourth night, I sat on a quiet rooftop bar with a glass of Vinho Verde and my phone buzzing in my hand. It was Tobias. "I hope you're letting yourself rest." I smiled. He always knew when to check in without crowding me. I replied, resting, thinking, reclaiming. Then I did something I never thought I would. I deleted the group chat access, the app, the screenshots, every digital breadcrumb of that life. Not because I forgave them, but because they didn't deserve the space anymore. I realized something in Lisbon. I had been keeping the anger alive to prove I wasn't weak. But the truth was, moving on didn't mean pretending it never happened. It just meant choosing freedom over fury. A few days later, while walking through Alfama, I saw a small shop with antique frames in the window. One caught my eye, silver, slightly tarnished, carved with vines. I bought it, not for a wedding photo, not for old memories, but for the Polaroid Tobias gave me, that blurry picture of two strangers laughing in the background of someone else's story. It felt like a beginning. Back in Zurich a week later, I met Tobias for dinner. He waited outside the station, holding 2 coffees like it was the most natural thing in the world. "How was it?" he asked. "Perfect." We didn't talk much during dinner. We didn't need to. There was a rhythm between us now, an understanding that didn't require constant explanation. But just before we said goodnight, I looked at him and asked the question that had been quietly blooming in the back of my mind. "Why did you believe me?" "From the beginning?" He didn't hesitate. "Because I saw you." He said it so simply as if it were obvious. And maybe it was. The next day, Elias sent me one last email. No greeting, no emotion, just a cold line of text. "She's sick. I thought you'd want to know." I stared at it for a long time. Beatrice, the woman who spent years trying to erase me, now she was fading. And I was being asked, passively, to care. I closed the message. Did I care? I didn't know. But I knew this. I wasn't going back. Not for guilt. Not for pity. Not even for closure. Some doors deserve to stay closed, not because you hate what's behind them, but because you finally love what's ahead. The email haunted me for a few days. "She's sick." That's all Elias had written. But it carried weight. Not because I cared about Beatrice, but because I hated that even now, they expected something from me. Sympathy. A response. Maybe some kind of noble forgiveness, so they could feel better about what they did. But forgiveness isn't a performance. And I wasn't going to stage 1 for their comfort. Still, part of me needed to know the truth. Not for her, but for me. I didn't want to make peace with the past, but I wanted to understand just how far it went. So I asked Tobias to meet me at the park in Lindenhof, the one overlooking the river. When I told him about the email, he didn't look surprised. "I heard something too," he said quietly. "Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. It's real," I nodded, unsure how to process it. "She spent years making me feel invisible," I whispered. "And now I'm supposed to care that she's disappearing?" "You don't have to care," Tobias said. "But you get to choose if you want to carry that weight around for the rest of your life." It wasn't about Beatrice anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. It was about me, what I was willing to keep, and what I was ready to put down. Later that night, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at that silver picture frame on my bookshelf. The Polaroid of me and Tobias, blurry, imperfect, real. And I wrote a letter, not to Beatrice, not even to Elias, to myself. I wrote about everything I'd lost, everything I'd gained, about how grief and relief can sit in the same room and not argue, about how silence can feel like power, not punishment, about how sometimes surviving isn't loud, it's quiet, consistent, and private. I ended it with a single line. "You were never the villain. You were just inconvenient to their illusion." And I burned it. I didn't need to keep the letter. I just needed to say it out loud to myself, even if the flames were the only witnesses. The next morning, I replied to Ilias's email. Just one sentence. I hope you're taking care of her. That was it. I didn't ask for updates. I didn't offer apologies. I didn't reopen the door. He didn't respond. And I felt ... nothing. Not cold, not cruel, just done. The truth is, the worst part of being erased isn't the silence. It's the memory of how hard you tried to be seen. But now, I wasn't trying anymore. I was building something new, something quiet, steady, honest, and maybe, just maybe, something like love. Life settled into something I hadn't felt in a long time. Rhythm. There were no grand declarations, no dramatic scenes, just mornings with coffee, long walks with Tobias, and the soft comfort of knowing no one expected me to shrink to fit into their idea of who I should be. But the past has sharp edges, and it finds ways to remind you it's still there. One afternoon, while checking my mail, I found a cream-colored envelope with no return address. My name written in calligraphy. Inside, an invitation. In honor of Beatrice Muller, a celebration of life. Geneva, 14th of November. She had died. No warning. No follow-up from Elias, just an invitation to sit at the table of mourning with people who had once laughed at the idea of me being family. I stared at the card for a long time. What did they want from me? To attend and cry? To make peace? Or to validate the illusion that I had somehow been part of it all, even when I'd been systematically excluded? I told Tobias that night. He didn't tell me what to do. He just listened, and that was exactly what I needed. Later, I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine and the invitation on the table, and I thought about Beatrice. I thought about the group chat, about the birthday party, about the lie Elias told, that I faked a pregnancy, and I thought about the photo Tobias gave me, that blurry, laughing version of myself, someone full of life and hope, someone I'd almost forgotten I used to be. I picked up the invitation and I shredded it. I didn't want to mourn Beatrice. Not because I hated her, but because I had already done my mourning years ago. I had mourned the love I never received, the support I never had, the family I was never really part of. That grief had passed through me in silence, in tears, in therapy sessions, in sleepless nights. This was just a footnote. The day of the memorial, I didn't wear black. I didn't sit in a church pew. I didn't pretend. Instead, I went to a gallery in Zurich, alone. There was a photography exhibit, images of women laughing, crying, working, building, living. One photograph stopped me cold. It was a woman staring straight at the camera, tears on her cheeks, but her chin lifted, defiant, proud. The caption below it read, "Sometimes survival looks like leaving without slamming the door." I stood there for a long time. That night, I called Tobias, told him I didn't go. "I know," he said gently, "and I'm proud of you. I don't know where this story ends yet. Maybe Tobias becomes something more. Maybe we stay exactly as we are, two people who found each other in the wreckage and decided to walk out together. What I do know is this: I was never the villain in their story. They just didn't know how to write a woman who didn't beg. The final act of grief is letting go of the need to be understood. I learned that in the months after Beatrice's funeral, as the dust settled and life resumed, quietly, normally, almost insultingly so. No more group chats. No more subtle digs or fake smiles at family dinners. Just silence. It turns out, when you stop fighting for a seat at the wrong table, you realize how many others were always open, waiting. I started working again. Freelance writing at first, then consulting for a small publishing house in Basel. They liked my tone, honest, unsentimental, direct. I smiled when they told me that. It felt good to be recognized for the very things Beatrice had once tried to crush. Tobias and I kept things simple. We didn't talk about the future much. It wasn't avoidance, it was respect. We knew what rushed promises could do to people. We weren't building a fantasy. We were rebuilding trust, carefully, piece by piece. But Elias? He stayed quiet until one Sunday afternoon when a letter arrived. Not an email, not a text, an actual letter. His handwriting. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. Inside were just 3 short paragraphs. I don't expect forgiveness. I wouldn't know what to do with it if you gave it to me. They told me I was weak, and I believed them. I let them convince me that loving you was some kind of rebellion I couldn't afford. You were never the problem. You were just inconvenient to the lies we were all telling ourselves. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. I didn't cry. I didn't respond. That was the difference between then and now. I no longer needed to perform healing for anyone else's benefit. A week later, Tobias and I drove to a lake just outside Lausanne. The sky was low and gray, and the water looked like metal, but it was peaceful. He handed me a coffee, leaned against the hood of the car, and said, "Do you ever think about how things might have turned out differently?" I knew what he meant. Not us. Them. No, I said simply, because different would have meant smaller. And I'm done shrinking. He smiled. Good, we didn't need to say more. Later that evening, as we walked along the edge of the lake, I noticed a child flying a kite in the wind. The string caught, tugged, twisted, but the child held on. Not tightly, not desperately, just firmly enough. And I realized something. Sometimes survival isn't about severing everything. Sometimes it's about learning what to hold on to and how. I didn't need to be part of the Muller family. I didn't need Beatrice's approval. I didn't need to rewrite the past or make it palatable. I just needed to remember my own voice. And I had it now. Clear, whole, unapologetic. The first time I saw Elias again was entirely by accident. It had been nearly a year since the separation. Papers signed, accounts divided, my name erased from the Muller circle like a typo in a family manuscript. I was walking through the old town in Geneva, on my way to meet a client, when I saw him. He was sitting at an outdoor cafe alone, a half-drunk espresso in front of him, and that same tired look I remembered from the final months of our marriage, like he was holding something heavy and pretending it wasn't crushing him. He looked up and froze. Our eyes met. And in that split second, I felt it. Not pain, not longing, just the cold recognition of someone I once tried desperately to hold on to. I gave him a small nod. That was all. He didn't smile, didn't wave, just watched as I walked past him like a ghost he wasn't sure was real. Later that evening, I told Tobias. He simply asked, "Are you okay?" And I was, truly, because something had changed. Seeing Elias didn't shake me. It didn't send me spiraling or questioning everything all over again. It confirmed what I already knew. He was part of the story that shaped me, but he no longer had the power to define me. A few weeks later, I got a message request on social media from Amelie. I hesitated before opening it. Curiosity won. I don't expect you to respond. I just wanted to say, you were right about all of it. No apology, no elaboration. But it didn't matter. The truth had finally started leaking through their carefully sealed facade. I showed it to Tobias. He raised an eyebrow. Closure? I shrugged. Maybe. Or maybe they're realizing the empire they protected so fiercely was built on cruelty. And now it's crumbling. The next day, I finally did something I'd been putting off for months. I returned to the apartment Elias and I once shared. It was empty now, freshly listed for rent. I'd asked the agent if I could retrieve a box I'd forgotten in the storage closet. That was a lie. There was no box. I just wanted to see it one last time. I walked through each room, remembering fragments of the life I used to live. The fake smiles, the silent dinners, the weight of not being enough. And then I stood in the bedroom, the place where I first discovered that group chat, where I realized I wasn't part of their real family. I stood there for a long moment, then whispered into the air, I was always real. You were just afraid of me. And with that, I turned off the lights and left. The past would always exist, but it no longer owned me. A few months later, I got a message that would have terrified the version of me that once tried so hard to fit in. Tobias's mother was turning 60. There would be a dinner, a formal one. Family invited, I was included. Part of me wanted to say no, not because I feared his family, but because of the echoes of Beatrice, still buried in the corners of my memory. I couldn't face another circle of whispers, another room full of careful smiles and knives behind backs. But Tobias just said they're not like them, so I went. It was in a vineyard near Lausanne. Warm lights strung between trees, long tables with fresh flowers, and laughter that didn't have sharp edges. Tobias introduced me simply. This is someone I care about. No explanation, no credentials, no need to justify my presence. I was seated beside his aunt, a woman named Sabine, who wore purple eyeliner and talked about poetry and skydiving in the same breath. She leaned in after the first toast and said, Tobias never brings anyone. You must have cracked something open. I smiled. He cracked something open in me first. It wasn't romantic. It was honest. And that honesty, that freedom to exist without shrinking, became the theme of the evening. No one asked me about Elias. No one brought up the Mullers, because no one saw me as someone's ex. They saw me. Later that night, Tobias and I sat on a bench overlooking the hills. The breeze was cool, and for a moment everything felt still. You know, I said softly, I used to think being part of a family meant being tolerated. Like it was something you earned by proving yourself. He looked at me, and now? Now I think the right ones don't make you prove anything. They just make space for you. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. His hand found mine, warm and steady. We stayed there until the lights dimmed and the last guests wandered to their cars. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was stepping into someone else's world. I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. Not because I fought for it, but because I stopped fighting for the wrong people. It's strange how healing sneaks up on you. One day, you're carrying the weight of 100 quiet betrayals, group chats, cold shoulders, the empty echo of your name unspoken in rooms where it should have meant something, and then, suddenly, you realize you're not carrying any of it anymore. You're just living. A year passed. I didn't mark the anniversary of my separation from Elias. There was no need. It was no longer a wound to be mourned, just a chapter that ended. One I no longer reread. Tobias and I didn't label things. Still didn't. We didn't have to. We had rhythm. We had safety. We had the kind of connection that didn't need performance, just presence. One afternoon, we visited a small coastal town in Italy. No itinerary, just 2 overnight bags and the decision to get lost for a few days. We rented a scooter, got caught in the rain, and ended up at a tiny inn run by a woman named Renata, who gave us lemon tea and warm towels like we were old friends. In that quiet, candlelit room, something settled in me. Not love, not in the storybook sense, but peace. The kind that wraps around you slowly without asking for attention. Later that night, I looked at Tobias and said, You know what I realized? He raised an eyebrow. What? I spent years waiting for someone to choose me, and now I realize I already did. I chose me. That's why everything feels different. He smiled, not surprised. You were always the one, he said. They just didn't know what they had. We didn't talk about marriage, or labels, or plans. We didn't need to, because everything I used to chase, the validation, the approval, the forced belonging, had been replaced by something better. Clarity, freedom, self-respect. Eventually, we went home, back to Zurich, back to the quiet life we built, brick by careful brick. And one morning, as I was opening a new journal, I wrote a single line at the top of the first page. Being left out of the group chat was the best thing that ever happened to me. Because it wasn't rejection, it was release. It wasn't exile, it was escape. They wanted to remind me I wasn't real family. What they didn't realize was that I was never meant to be, because the family I found afterward, the one I built, piece by piece, with people who saw me, that one was real. And it was mine.